People say Christmas is the season of light, but sometimes the brightest days hide the deepest shadows. Last night, two hearts that had been apart for 4 long years finally beat in sync again. But within minutes, one was taken away in blood, the other in handcuffs and tears. Elias Drake, standing on the edge of life and death. Ivy Hale, trapped between a cell and the cruelest betrayal of her life. And this Christmas brings no miracle, only truth. The truth that the man she once called her fiancé was the one who set the trap. The truth that 4 years ago, Elias didn't disappear to abandon her, but to protect her. The truth that the one who wants her dead is still out there, free. Episode 2 begins here, where one fights to survive, and the other fights to prove her innocence, so they can find their way back to each other. Welcome back to the Ambiguous Heart. Take a deep breath, because what comes next will be darker than the snowstorm outside. The cold, sterile hospital light stabbed straight into his eyes. Elias jolted awake, breath heavy as if someone were sitting on his chest. The smell of antiseptic, the beeping monitors, the frantic footsteps in the hallway, all of it crashed together into a dizzying wave. He tried to sit up, but pain ripped through his shoulder like it was being torn open again. The wound was bandaged, IV lines hooked into his arm, thick layers of gauze wrapped around his chest. But none of it, not the pain, not the drugs, not the confusion, was what made Elias panic. It was the fact that Ivy wasn't there. Ivy! He shot upright, ripping the IV line free, his hands shaking with adrenaline and terror. Ivy, where is she? A nurse rushed in. Mr. Drake, you can't sit up. Your injury? Where is V? Elias's voice cracked like thunder, sharp and wild enough to make everyone flinch. A doctor hurried in next, trying to remain calm. Mr. Drake, please lie down. There are things you don't understand, Ye. I'll ask one more time. Elias grabbed the doctor by the coat, dragging him close. Ivy, Hale, where is she? The doctor exhaled slowly, like he was about to deliver the worst news possible. Ms. Ivy Hale has been taken into police custody. Elias froze. What? She's been detained in connection with a large-scale money laundering case involving a secret account under her mother's name. The police say they have evidence. No. Elias shook his head immediately, voice low and sharper than a blade. Ivy would never do that. We don't have the authority to intervene. The doctor swallowed hard and stepped back. They took her right after you were brought into surgery. And what? Elias asked, his tone dropping into something dark and bottomless. The one who filed the report was her fiancé. For several seconds, Elias simply couldn't breathe. His fists clenched so tight the knuckles turned white. His blue-gray eyes dimmed, storming over like a hurricane ready to swallow the city whole. Jonathan Hale. He dared to touch Ivy. He dared to throw her into a cell on Christmas night. He dared to use the law to sever her from Elias. The pain in Elias's shoulder disappeared. Only the murderous rage remained. He tried to stand. A nurse grabbed his arm. A mistake. Don't touch me! He knocked her hand away, eyes blazing. Mr. Drake, you can't leave. Your shoulder. I don't care about my shoulder. Elias's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. I care about Ivy. He stepped off the bed, ripping the medical lines from his skin, staggering, but every step fueled by the kind of fury that could burn the world to ash. The doctor shouted, You can't leave! You were just saved! Elias stopped at the doorway. He turned his head. Half his face drowned in shadow, the other washed in the pale hospital light. Saved? He let out a cold, bone-deep laugh. Without Ivy, what's the point of saving me? And Elias walked out of the hospital room. No weapon, no coat, only a bleeding heart, and a rage that could scorch the city to the ground. He would find Ivy, even if he had to burn the entire world to do it. The interrogation room was as cold as a morgue. Only a metal table, 2 chairs, and a single yellow light hung above Ivy, casting a sickly pale glow over her face. Handcuffs clamped around her wrists. Cold. Heavy. She never imagined her Christmas would end like this. A detective dropped a file in front of her. Miss Ivy Hale, you're under investigation for the transfer of $2.7 million into an account under your late mother's name. Do you have anything to say? Ivy stared at the numbers. They meant nothing. Everything meant nothing. I don't know anything about that money. Her voice trembled violently. My mother would never, she couldn't have. There's a signature from you in the transaction. The officer tossed a document across the table. Ivy looked, and her heart plummeted. It was her signature, but she had never signed anything. I didn't sign this. She screamed in helpless panic. This is forged. I swear. I swear I don't know anything about that account. The officer shrugged. You can say whatever you want, but the person who reported you says otherwise. Ivy lifted her head, her eyes wide, wet. Where is he? I want to see him. I want to know why. The door swung open before she could finish, and he walked in. Jonathan Hale. Perfect suit, Christmas red tie, a face that hours ago stood waiting for her at the altar, now twisted into the embodiment of betrayal. Ivy, he said softly, sugar dripping from his voice, sugar laced with poison. You look exhausted. Ivy shot to her feet, the cuffs clanging against the table. Jonathan, why did you do this? I never did anything to hurt you. Why would you accuse me? Jonathan sighed, stepping closer as if pitying her. Ivy, I didn't want this, but I have to follow the law. The law? Ivy choked. You know I'm innocent. Jonathan smiled, a smile that froze her blood. Innocent? Are you sure? He placed a stack of photos on the table. Ivy looked down and nearly collapsed. Photos of her mother standing beside a man Ivy had never seen. A signed receipt of funds. A document stamped beneficiary Ivy Hale. The world tilted under her feet. No, no, this isn't right. Ivy shook her head, tears streaming. My mother wasn't involved, and I absolutely wasn't. Jonathan bent down until their eyes were level. His gaze was no longer warm, no longer gentle. It was empty, cold, soulless. You still don't get it, Ivy. There are things that were decided long before you were born. Ivy's breath caught in her throat. Why? Jonathan? I was your bride-to-be. Are you really planning to destroy my life? Jonathan shrugged, as if the devastation he caused meant nothing. Actually, he leaned close, whispering into her ear, voice dripping with venom. I don't need a marriage. I need the money, and I need you out of the way. Ivy shoved him back. You're insane! Jonathan didn't flinch. He simply straightened his suit jacket and turned to the officer. She's also connected to a violent incident tonight, possibly an accomplice. I suggest you hold her as long as possible. Ivy collapsed into the chair, blood draining from her face. Jonathan, why? He gave her one last smile, cruel, curved, triumphant. In this world, the weak die. Merry Christmas, Ivy. The door slammed shut. Tears spilled down her cheeks, each one heavier than a bullet. Alone, betrayed, trapped, and the only man who had ever protected her was somewhere between life and death. She clenched her fists until the cuffs bit into her skin. Elias, I have to. Get back to him. But the interrogation room door stayed shut. Outside, footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, deliberate, approaching. A man's voice cut through the suffocating silence. Release her. Ivy's head snapped up. She knew that voice. It wasn't possible. Elias couldn't stand, not with that injury. But it wasn't Elias. The voice was deeper, older, and colder than the winter night outside. The officer stiffened. You're... The man stepped inside, dressed in a charcoal-tailored coat, eyes like steel polished to a deadly shine. Legal counsel for Drake Industries, he said smoothly, and Ivy Hale. His gaze sharpened, cutting through the room like a blade. Comes with me. Ivy froze. Her heart tightened painfully. Elias had sent someone for her. Even when he couldn't save himself, he still saved her first. The handcuffs clicked open, and red marks immediately bloomed across Ivy's wrists. She was pulled to her feet by a man in a gray suit, his face sharp and cold like a freshly honed blade. Come with me. His voice was low, exact, unshakable. Ivy stumbled a step. Who are you? Ephraim Stone, he replied curtly, private attorney to Elias Drake. Her heart tightened. Is he okay? Her voice was so small it barely existed. Ephraim didn't answer. He pushed the metal door open, letting her step out into the hallway. Two officers stood there, but none dared to stop them. There was tension on their faces, like they'd just been ordered by someone they had no desire to cross. Ivy was escorted to a car. The door shut behind her. The cold interrogation room drifted away in the distance, like a nightmare dissolving but refusing to vanish completely. The car moved. Only the sound of rain against the windows and the blur of streetlights filled the silence. After a long while, Ivy finally whispered, How did Elias know I was arrested? Ephraim kept his eyes straight ahead. Because he woke up and you weren't there. Her lip trembled, eyes burning. Did he say anything? He did. Ephraim tilted his head slightly. He said, get her out immediately, at any cost. Ivy turned away, tears spilling down her cheeks. Ephraim went on. Drake Industries has a strategic-level private security division. When Elias gives an order, no one is allowed to be slow. Her fists tightened. That truth hurt her, comforted her, broke her, and anchored her all at once. A man like Elias, who held entire worlds in his hands, had chosen to save her before saving himself. Ephraim opened his briefcase, pulling out a black envelope. There are things you need to know. Ivy shivered. What things? He handed her a set of documents. Information on the secret account under your mother's name, the $2.7 million. I told you. I never touched that money, Ivy whispered. I know. Ephraim nodded. The records show that transaction wasn't done by your mother. Ivy's head snapped up. Then who? Ephraim met her eyes through the rearview mirror, his gaze razor sharp. Jonathan, your fiancé. Ivy froze. No, Jonathan, he would never. Jonathan is behind most of the laundering tied to the organization that once hunted Elias. Ephraim's tone was slow, precise, leaving no room for denial. He needed a scapegoat, and he chose you. Ivy gripped the seat, her fingers ice cold. But why me? Ephraim closed the file, his voice dropping lower. Because your mother hid information that organization wanted erased. She never received the money. She was running. Ivy couldn't breathe. Her thoughts spun like a blizzard. My mother was running. From who? Ephraim answered instantly. From the very organization that trained Elias Drake. She sank back, dizzy enough to collapse. No, that's impossible. My mother was ordinary. She had nothing to do with that world. You think Elias is ordinary? Ephraim countered quietly. Ivy's eyes widened. He once told me he wasn't a cop. He wasn't a criminal. He was something in between. Correct, Ephraim nodded. Elias is the only person who ever walked away from that organization alive. His gaze darkened. And your mother was the only witness to one of their darkest operations. Ivy grabbed her head, left heart twisting painfully as if a hand squeezed it from the inside. You're saying my mother's death wasn't an accident? Ephraim said nothing, but that silence was the cruelest confirmation she could have received. Ivy choked. Her throat closed. Breathing became impossible. The car turned down a smaller road. Ephraim spoke softly. You need to see Elias. Ivy clutched her coat, her voice breaking apart. Where is he? Ephraim turned to her fully then, and his eyes carried the weight of stone. The ICU. Elias is in critical condition. Ivy's world stopped. Her breath vanished. Her heart collapsed. Ephraim watched her with an unreadable expression. You must prepare yourself for the possibility that he won't make it. And Ivy's entire world shattered. The ICU doors opened with the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Ivy nearly collapsed when she saw Elias lying there, pale, motionless, his shoulder wrapped in thick white bandages, a ventilator on his lips, IV lines running across his body. The man who always stood tall amidst gunfire, cold and unshakable as steel, now looked like a fallen angel with a broken wing. A nurse stepped forward to stop her, but Ephraim raised a hand. She's allowed in. Ivy walked slowly, each step feeling like she was moving through fog. Only when she reached his bedside did she dare to breathe. Elias. Her voice cracked apart. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed his hand. It was cold, so cold it squeezed her heart painfully tight. You said you wouldn't leave me again. Her tears fell onto his bandaged hand. You're not allowed to break that promise, Elias. His hand didn't respond. Not a twitch, not a movement. Ivy lowered her head onto his chest, choked sobs shaking her body. She cried. Cried as if the past 4 years of pain she'd buried had burst through all at once, crashing over her like a wave she could no longer hold back. Ephraim stood in the corner of the room, watching the most fragile thing in the world unfold before him, a woman who loved a man enough to face down the world for him, and a man who could only express his love through the wounds carved into his body. After several minutes, Ivy forced herself to steady, wiping her tears. You said Elias didn't leave that organization normally. She whispered to Ephraim, still staring at Elias. What exactly happened 4 years ago? Ephraim exhaled heavily. The truth isn't easy to hear. I already lost him once. Her voice had hardened. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. Ephraim hesitated, then pulled a small USB drive from his case. Your mother and Elias were both tied to an incident the organization wanted to bury. A murder. Ivy whipped around. What are you saying? Elias witnessed the whole thing. Your mother recorded the evidence, and the organization decided anyone connected to it had to die. Ivy covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Ephraim went on. Elias tried to get your mother out of the city. She refused. She wanted to take the evidence to the police herself, and that night, they killed her. Ivy dropped into a chair. No, no, that can't be. My mother was a victim, and Elias. Elias was forced to disappear to keep from being erased. Ephraim said, he cut all contact with you to keep you alive. Ivy froze. In that moment, all the anger, all the resentment she'd carried for 4 long years crumbled to dust. Why didn't he tell me? She whispered through tears. Why did he let me believe he abandoned me? Ephraim was silent. Only after a long pause did he answer. Because Elias knew if he told you the truth, you'd go with him. And that would mean you'd die before he could ever save you. Ivy buried her face in her hands, her sobs shaking her whole body. He's so stupid, she cried. Did he think I didn't want to live? Ephraim looked at her, voice softening. No, Ivy. He thought you deserved to live, even if that meant living without him. She turned back to Elias. His face was peacefully still, painfully peaceful, as if he were only sleeping, as if one whisper from her would make him open his eyes. Ivy held his hand again, pressing it to her cheek. Elias, she breathed, fragile as a sigh. I don't know how much you've suffered. I don't know what you carried alone for 4 years. But I know one thing. Her tears slid down onto his fingers. I love you, and I'm not letting you go again. She leaned down and kissed the white bandage on his shoulder, right where he had been shot shielding her. At that moment, Elias's fingers twitched. Ivy froze. Elias? His chest rose and fell unevenly. The heart monitor flickered. The beeping changed. Elias, can you hear me? Her voice trembled violently. Elias slowly opened his eyes, halfway, unfocused, but looking straight at her. His lips moved, trying to form words. Ivy leaned closer, heart hammering. Elias, I'm here. And he whispered, don't trust anyone. The heart monitor suddenly spiked. Ephraim rushed forward. Call the doctor, now. But Ivy stood frozen, because Elias's warning wasn't vague. It wasn't general. It was meant for someone very specific. Someone standing right here in this room. Ivy turned her head toward Ephraim, and in that instant, a suspicion sharp as a blade tore through her heart. Elias's words still hung in the air, like a shard of icy wind slicing through the hospital glass. Don't trust anyone. His body twitched faintly, then his eyes slid shut again, drifting into a half-conscious haze. Doctors and nurses rushed in, pushing Ivy aside as they checked his vitals and blood pressure. But Ivy hardly heard any of it. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart, and that warning echoing inside her skull, for the second time, louder, sharper. Don't trust anyone. She turned toward Ephraim. He was still standing there, his expression perfectly calm, too calm. Ivy blinked, her heart tightening. While she cried over Elias, Ephraim hadn't moved at all. No concern, no urgency, just observation, like a man reviewing a report. Exa, Stinrio, Ivy called, her voice soft but razor-edged. Auto axio something. Ephraim turned. Geodea, Elsia acid natritsuenio. Ivy held his gaze. What oyu odyu nit kemetne yeptata? Ephraim's face didn't change. He was likely delirious. Delirious? Ivy narrowed her eyes. But he looked directly at me, and he said every word clearly. Ephraim adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Ivy, elasi si intirol kundioitno, hiam asi naintigtat lekas coherence? Aev ze oyu atent? What do you know about my mother? Ivy cut him off suddenly. Ephraim paused, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Ivy to see he was choosing his words. Icon, Ephraim said slowly. She was an unwanted witness. You knew she was murdered? Ivy's fists tightened. I knew, Ephraim replied plainly. But I didn't know the details. Ivy stared deeper. Then do you know why Elias was shot on Christmas Eve 4 years ago? Ephraim's fingers tightened ever so slightly on the handle of his briefcase. A tiny motion anyone else would miss, but Ivy didn't. She stepped back, breath catching. Mr. Stone, her voice dropped, low and trembling. You were there, weren't you? Ephraim froze, only for a heartbeat. But that was enough. Ivy staggered back further. My mother died. Elias vanished, and you expect me to believe you knew nothing? You're misunderstanding. I am not misunderstanding. Ivy's voice broke, shaking with pain more than anger. There are too many coincidences, too many things you can't explain. Tears welled up, not from fear, but from the ache tearing her open. She pointed at him. If Elias told me not to trust anyone, who do you think I would suspect first? Ephraim sighed. For the first time, his expression was no longer entirely cold. There was something like regret or a warning. Miss Ivy, he said slowly, there are truths you want to know, but once you know them, there is no going back. Ivy clutched Elias's unmoving hand. The only path I choose, she whispered, her voice steady as steel, is the path that leads to the truth. Ephraim studied her for a long moment. Then he opened his briefcase and took out a new envelope, dark crimson. Elias left this for you 4 years ago. His voice dropped low. He never got the chance to give it to you. Ivy felt her breath stop. What is it? The real reason Elias disappeared. Ephraim placed the envelope in her shaking hand. But understand this, opening it means you will have no one left to protect you. Ivy clutched the envelope, her fingers trembling. Ephraim stepped back, his voice turning cold once more. And Ivy, if you're doubting me, then you must doubt Elias as well. Her heart lurched painfully. You're joking, right? Ephraim looked straight into her eyes, not with malice, not with softness, but with the gaze of someone who knows she's about to step into a storm far worse than the pain of the last 4 years. That organization, he murmured, never lets anyone leave without leaving a price behind. The room grew colder, the air thickened. Ivy held the crimson envelope, her heart pounding wildly, because she knew. Inside it was not just Elias's past, but the curse that bound them both. Ivy's whisper dissolved into the sterile hospital air, fragile, aching, barely alive. But the letter didn't end there. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to read on. You will never understand how many times I picked up my phone to call you, only to watch the organization monitor every breath I took. I couldn't risk giving them a reason to look at you again. You were my greatest weakness, Ivy, and in their world, a weakness is simply something to kill. Ivy covered her mouth to muffle a sob. Her tears spilled freely now, not just from heartbreak, but from realization. Every night I dreamed of you. Every morning I woke up wishing I had just taken you and run. But I knew if we ran, they would chase you first. So I stayed away. Not because I wanted to live without you, but because living without you was the only way to keep you alive. Ivy shook her head violently, whispering, Elias, Elias, no, you should have told me. I would have stayed with you. I would have fought with you. She looked up as if he might hear her through the machines. But the letter continued, raw, unraveling, painfully honest. There is something else I must tell you. I found out who ordered your mother's death. And Ivy, it wasn't the organization. Ivy's blood ran cold. Her fingers tightened around the paper. It was someone inside your mother's own family. Someone who knew what she found. Someone who benefited from her disappearance. I promised myself I would uncover the truth before I returned to you. But if you're reading this, I didn't finish that mission. Ivy's entire body tensed. Family? Who? Why? How? Her breath shook as she read the final lines. If you ever find yourself alone in the dark, if you ever feel hunted, if you ever feel like the world is falling apart, don't trust anyone. Not until I am there. Because the person who betrayed your mother is closer than you think. And Ivy, the minute they learn you know the truth, they will come for you too. Ivy dropped the letter. Her vision spun. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Closer than she thinks. A shadow moved across her memory. Jonathan, her aunt, old family documents, the sealed lawsuit, the inheritance fights, footsteps, strangers around her house, the destroyed wedding night. Pieces snapped together so violently she felt faint. She grabbed the chair to steady herself. Ephraim watched her, unreadable. Ivy's voice was barely a breath. Elias knew all of this, and he still chose to save me. Her eyes burned with a new kind of fire. Not fear, not grief, but resolve. Steel hard, sharp, alive. She looked at Elias, pale, wounded, unmoving. I'll finish what you started, she whispered, lifting his hand to her cheek. I'll find who killed my mother. I'll expose the organization. I'll tear down anyone who tries to hurt you. She leaned close to him, her lips trembling against his ear. And when you wake up, you won't find a helpless girl waiting. You'll find someone ready to burn the world beside you. Behind her, Ephraim finally spoke, quiet, calculated. So you've chosen your path. Ivy didn't turn. Her gaze stayed on Elias. Her voice sharpened. I'm done being afraid. Outside, snow hammered the windows as if the storm itself sensed something had changed. Because it had. Ivy Hale, the girl the world thought was fragile, had finally stepped into the fire. And fire never forgets. The monitors beeped in frantic pulses, but Ivy didn't hear them. All she heard was the echo of his name falling from Elias's lips like a final verdict. Jonathan. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. Her vision narrowed. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Ephraim reached out as if to steady her. She slapped his hand away. Don't touch me. Her voice was low, too calm, the kind of calm that hides a storm so violent it could tear the world apart. Ephraim swallowed. Ivy, you need to breathe. You need to calm down. Calm down? Her voice shattered the room. My mother was murdered. Elias almost died. I was nearly killed tonight. And the man behind all of it, the man I trusted enough to marry, is Jonathan Hale. Her knees nearly buckled, but rage held her upright. It wasn't just betrayal, she whispered, shaking. It was premeditated, calculated, a trap he built for years. Ephraim tried again, carefully. You need proof. Emotion won't. I don't need proof. Her cry was raw, tearing at her throat. Elias said his name. Elias, who never lies, never confuses, never says anything that isn't life or death, said Jonathan. She pressed a shaking hand over her mouth. Behind her fingers, her voice broke. The man I was about to marry was the same man who destroyed my real family. Her body trembled, and he tried to destroy me too. She turned toward Elias, pale, wounded, barely conscious, and touched his cheek with trembling fingers. Elias, you've been carrying this alone for 4 years. Her tears fell on his skin. I'm so sorry, I didn't know, I didn't understand. Elias's hand lifted weakly, barely more than a twitch, but he found her wrist. Ivy, his voice was faint, scraped raw. Don't trust. She choked on a sob and leaned closer. I know now. But Elias was still struggling to speak. Jonathan, not alone. Ivy froze. Ephraim stiffened immediately. Who else is involved? Ivy asked urgently. Elias, who else? But Elias's eyes fluttered shut. The monitor steadied, signaling he'd slipped back into a semi-conscious state. Ivy stood there, every inch of her drenched in fear and fury. Not alone. The words burrowed into her skull. Jonathan wasn't working by himself. Someone else, someone close, was pulling strings with him. Ephraim exhaled shakily. Ivy, we need to leave this room. If Jonathan has allies inside the hospital. Ivy turned slowly, eyes cold and shining with a dangerous clarity. For 4 years, she whispered, I thought Elias destroyed my life. Her fists clenched, her voice sharpened into something lethal. But the one who destroyed it was the man I trusted at the altar. She stepped toward the door. And I'm done being hunted. She touched the crimson letter at her chest, the last truth Elias gave her. I'll find Jonathan, she said quietly, no matter what it costs me. Her eyes flicked up, no longer soft, and whoever stands with him. Ephraim felt a chill run down his spine. Because Ivy wasn't breaking, she was transforming, and the world had no idea what kind of storm was about to be unleashed. The alarms kept howling, but Ivy heard nothing. Not the nurses screaming, not the gunshots down the hall, not the security shouting orders. Just those 6 words, cold enough to freeze her bones solid. I'm here under the orders of Jonathan Hale. Her heartbeat stopped. Ephraim moved instantly, stepping in front of her as the intruder approached with slow, predatory steps. Miss Ivy, he said quietly, without turning his head, if you have ever listened to me, do it now. Ivy's voice was barely a breath. He sent someone to kill Elias? Ephraim's jaw tightened. And to take you. Her stomach twisted. Her legs nearly gave out. The intruder scraped a gloved hand along the shattered glass as he walked, his boots crunching over shards. He didn't look at the nurses. He didn't look at the guards. His gaze was locked on Ivy, like a wolf finally finding the scent it had been hunting all night. Step away from Drake, the intruder ordered coldly, or I will remove you from him myself. Ivy gripped Elias's hand even tighter, tears mixing with adrenaline. Never. The man tilted his head, as if amused, as if she were a child clinging to something she didn't understand. Your fiancé wants him alive for questioning, he continued, voice low and deadly. But he did not request you in the same condition. Ivy's blood iced over. He wants me, she swallowed. Dead? No, the intruder said calmly. He wants you delivered. Ivy nearly choked. Ephraim's hand tightened around his briefcase. That's enough, he snapped. You won't touch her. The intruder smirked under his hood. You think you can stop me, lawyer? Then, flash, he moved, not walked, not lunged. He blurred forward, closing half the distance between them in the time it took Ivy to gasp. Ephraim barely had time to react. He slammed his briefcase open, revealing a concealed weapon Ivy didn't recognize, and fired. Bang! The bullet struck the intruder's shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. He rolled his neck, the bone cracking loudly. "This is a waste of my time," the man growled. And then he ran straight at them. Ivy screamed. Ephraim shoved her behind him. Crash! The intruder hit Ephraim hard enough to launch him across the ICU room. He slammed into the wall, coughing blood. "Ivy, run!" Ephraim shouted, but Ivy couldn't run. Elias lay unconscious, barely breathing. Connected to machines, if she left him, he would die. The intruder stepped over broken glass toward her. One step, two, three. "Your mother should have given up the recording," he said coldly. "Now you'll finish what she started." Ivy trembled, pressing closer to Elias. "Stay away from him." The man didn't stop. "I said stay away!" She grabbed the nearest metal tray and hurled it. He slapped it aside effortlessly. Then he reached for her throat when a gunshot exploded through the room. The intruder jerked. A bullet ripped through his arm. His head snapped toward the doorway, where a man stood, leaning against the frame, pale, bleeding, barely upright, but alive. Ivy's breath shattered. "Elias." Elias Drake raised the smoking gun with his good arm, eyes blazing with a death sentence. His voice was a rasp of fury and devotion intertwined. "Get away from her." The intruder stared at him, stunned. You weren't supposed to wake." Bang! Elias fired again. This time, the intruder dove behind a crash cart, rolling into the hallway to escape the direct line of fire. "Ivy!" Elias shouted hoarsely. "Get down!" But before he could finish, his legs buckled. He collapsed onto one knee, blood soaking his bandages. "Elias!" Ivy threw herself beside him just as Ephraim dragged himself up, coughing violently. The intruder retreated into the smoke-filled corridor, but his voice echoed back, dripping with threat. "This isn't over, Ivy Hale. Your fiancé expects your delivery by dawn." Elias tried to stand again, but Ivy held him down, sobbing. "You idiot, Elias, you can't!" His fingers reached her wrist, soft but insistent. "I told you." He coughed, blood on his lip. "I won't let them touch you." Ephraim stumbled toward them. "We need to leave," he rasped. "Now, before he circles back." Ivy wiped her tears, shaking violently. She looked at Elias, the man who had dragged himself out of death just to protect her. And in that moment, the last piece of her old life shattered completely. She touched his face, tender, breaking. "I'm not letting you die," she whispered. Elias's eyes softened, even through the pain. "I'm not letting you die," he answered. Outside, alarms screamed, security scrambled, snow hammered the windows like fists, but in that ICU room, 3 people remained breathing. A dying man, a hunted woman, and a lawyer who may or may not be on their side, and Ivy. For the first time, Ivy Hale was ready to fight back. The dagger sliced downward, fast, silent, aimed straight for Ephraim's ribs. Ivy's scream ripped through the ICU. "Ephraim!" Ephraim reacted a split second before the blade reached him. He twisted his body, the dagger missing his vital organs, but cutting a deep line across his side. Blood sprayed. He hissed, but didn't fall. Instead, he caught the attacker's wrist, slammed his elbow into the man's forearm, forcing him to drop the dagger. The metal clattered across the floor. But the stranger was trained far more than a common hitman. He pivoted, low and fluid, sweeping Ephraim off his feet. Ephraim crashed hard onto the ground. The stranger mounted him, pinning him with his knee, pulling another blade from the holster on his boot. This one was longer, sharper, meant for killing. Ivy darted from her hiding spot. "Stop, please, stop!" Ephraim wasn't listening anymore. Neither was the man trying to murder him. The blade lifted, steel glinting under the red emergency lights. Ephraim grabbed the attacker's wrist, stopping the blade barely an inch above his chest, muscles strained, teeth clenched, blood spreading beneath him. The stranger snarled, "You're in the wrong fight, lawyer." Ephraim growled back, "You have no idea who I used to be." Their arms shook violently, the dagger suspended between them. Ivy's eyes darted around desperately. The gun. Where was the gun? Where? There, under the far bed. She lunged for it on her hands and knees, ignoring the shards of glass gouging into her palms. Behind her, the stranger roared and shoved Ephraim's arm down another inch. Ivy scrambled forward, just as the stranger's blade broke through Ephraim's defense, descending toward his heart. Ivy seized the gun, rolled onto her back, aimed with shaking hands, and pulled the trigger. Pfft! The suppressed shot hit the stranger square in the shoulder. He jerked sideways, howling. Ephraim used the opening, twisting, reversing their positions, and slamming the man onto the floor. He pinned the attacker's arm and wrenched the blade free. The stranger struggled, gasping. You're not just a lawyer. What are you?" Ephraim's voice was cold enough to freeze the blood on the floor. Someone you were never trained to kill. One strike, a precise blow. The stranger's eyes rolled back, and his body went limp, unconscious. Not dead, but very close. Ivy dropped the gun, shaking so badly she could barely breathe. Her hands were covered in blood. Ephraim's, her own, the attacker's. She couldn't even tell anymore. Ephraim pushed himself up with a groan. Ivy, are you hurt? She shook her head, tears spilling out uncontrollably. Elias, he needs help. They both turned. Elias lay still on the bed, too still. The heart monitor beeped irregularly, warning alarms rising. Ivy rushed to him. Elias, please wake up. His fingers twitched weakly. Barely. He was drifting again. Ephraim staggered over, blood dripping from his side. We have to move him, now, before Jonathan sends the next wave. Ivy grabbed Elias's hand with both of hers. Her voice was shattered glass. Please, don't leave me again. Elias's eyelids fluttered, just slightly, enough to whisper 3 broken words. Ivy, run, now. Ivy shook her head violently, sobbing. I'm not leaving without you. Ephraim placed a bloodied hand on her shoulder. His voice was steady, clear, urgent. Ivy, this attack wasn't meant to kill Elias. She froze. Her breath hitched. What? Ephraim's expression darkened. It was meant to reclaim him. The emergency sirens wailed overhead. Down the corridor, more footsteps approached. A second team. Jonathan's real squad. Ivy's entire world collapsed into a single choice. Run, fight, or lose Elias forever. And that is where the episode ends. Ivy shook her head violently, tears streaking down her cheeks. I won't leave him. I won't. Ephraim tightened his grip on her shoulders, forcing her eyes to meet his. Ivy Hale, he said, voice low, fierce, unshakably steady. Elias did not survive 4 years of hell just for you to die on a hospital floor. Ivy's breath shattered. Ephraim continued, his own blood dripping onto the tiles. If Jonathan gets his hands on you, Elias will have no leverage, no reason to be kept alive. You are the only thing keeping him breathing. Ivy's knees buckled. But? No buts. Ephraim grabbed her wrist and pressed something cold and metallic into her palm, a keycard. This opens the emergency stairwell. Down 2 flights, left corridor. My car is parked at the exit. Go. She stared at the card, dazed. You're staying. I have to stabilize him, Ephraim said without hesitation. And I need to buy you time. Her whole body trembled. That man nearly killed you. You're bleeding. You can't fight another. Ephraim gave a sharp, humorless smirk. Believe it or not, Miss Ivy, that wasn't the worst fight of my week. Before she could respond, a loud metallic clang echoed down the hallway. Footsteps. Not 1, not 2, a full unit. Jonathan's reinforcements. Ivy's heart stopped. Ephraim spun toward the sound. His expression changed instantly, sharpening, hardening, turning colder than winter steel. They're here. Ivy clutched Elias's hand one last time. Elias? Her voice cracked like breaking glass. Please don't die before I get back. His fingers twitched faintly against hers, as if giving permission, as if saying go. Ephraim stepped between Ivy and the doorway. Run. His voice turned lethal. Don't look back. Ivy held her breath, then bolted toward the emergency door. The moment she shoved it open, alarms shrieked louder, announcing her escape. Men shouted from down the hall, Target is moving. Lock down the floor. Ivy sprinted down the stairwell, every footstep echoing like a ticking bomb beneath her. Behind her, gunshots exploded, shouts erupted. Ephraim's voice roared commands she'd never heard a lawyer speak. The hospital had become a war zone. But Ivy didn't stop. Not until she heard Jonathan's voice, echoing through the stairwell via the assassin's open phone still on the ICU floor. Find her. No survivors. Her blood ran cold. She ran faster. Because tonight, Ivy Hale stopped being a victim and became the only person left alive who could bring Jonathan Hale to his knees. The nurse's smile never reached her eyes. I was told to bring you in alive if possible. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But dead works too. Ivy froze. Every muscle in her body locked, her throat constricted, her vision blurred at the edges. This was it. This was exactly how Jonathan wanted her to die. Quietly, efficiently, erased from the world before sunrise. Elias. I'm sorry. But just as the nurse began to pull the trigger, Ephraim moved. Not stepped, not lunged. He threw himself in front of Ivy like a shield. Pfft. The shot fired. A wet, terrible sound followed. Ivy's scream caught in her throat. Ephraim staggered, a bloom of red spreading across his side. He didn't fall. He turned and punched the nurse so hard she slammed into the elevator panel. The gun flew from her hand. Ivy crawled toward it instinctively, but the nurse recovered terrifyingly fast. She kicked Ivy backward, sending her crashing into the elevator wall. Then she grabbed Ephraim by the throat. "You were always in the way," she hissed into his ear. Ephraim's teeth clenched as he struggled. Ivy forced herself up, dizzy, gasping. "Let him go!" The nurse's head snapped toward Ivy. "Oh no, dear," she purred. "You're my priority." The elevator lights flickered violently. The building was dropping into full lockdown. A digital voice announced, "Security override in progress. All floors sealing in 10 seconds." Ivy's heart lunged. If the elevator seals, we're all dead. The nurse reached for the gun again. Ephraim acted first. In one brutal motion, he tore the metal service panel off the wall and smashed it into her face. Crack! Blood sprayed. The nurse collapsed. Ephraim grabbed Ivy's hand. "Doors are going to open in 3, 2. Ding!" The elevator doors parted, and 2 security men stood waiting. Uniformed, armed. Ivy's breath stopped. "Jonathan's men? Take the girl," one of them ordered. Ivy staggered back. "No, no!" Ephraim shoved her sideways, slamming the emergency stop button. The doors jerked halfway shut as the men lunged. Ephraim's voice ripped through the chaos. "Ivy, run!" She didn't think, didn't breathe. She hurled herself through the narrowing gap, scraping her arm, hitting the floor hard, but she was out. The doors slammed. Men pounded from the other side. Ivy scrambled to her feet, gasping, shaking, tears streaking down her face. "Mr. Stone, no answer!" Just silence. Then, gunshots exploded inside the elevator. Ivy stumbled backward, hand over her mouth. "Ephraim?" But she had no time to break, no time to cry. Down the hallway, more footsteps thundered. Jonathan's second wave. A security alarm blared. Target located. East wing. That was her. She ran. Heart exploding in her chest, tears blurring everything, legs barely holding her up. But she ran. Because behind her, men wanted her dead. And ahead of her, Elias was barely clinging to life. She would not let Jonathan win. Not tonight. Not ever. Ivy Hale vanished into the emergency stairwell. Determined to survive the night, Jonathan Hale marked as her last. The elevator lights flickered back on, and in that exact second, the cold barrel of a gun pressed against the center of Ivy's forehead. The young nurse smiled, a smile with no warmth, no soul, no trace of humanity. "You shouldn't resist," she whispered, almost tenderly, as if soothing a child. "Jonathan doesn't like women who think they can escape him." Ivy froze. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. Ephraim lunged forward. "No!" But she moved impossibly fast. A gunshot exploded, burying a bullet into Ephraim's shoulder. Blood spattered. He staggered, but forced himself to stay upright, shielding Ivy with his body, even as crimson soaked through his clothes. She tilted her head. "You really are loyal, to the point of being pathetic." The gun lifted again, this time aimed at both of them. Life and death were separated by a single heartbeat. Ephraim didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He hurled himself at her, slamming her arm downward. PFF'd. 2 silenced shots ripped across the elevator floor. She shrieked, "You stubborn old man!" Their bodies clashed violently in the narrow metal box. Ivy stood frozen, hands trembling, tears spilling as her legs refused to move. She heard Ephraim roar, "Run, Ivy! Run!" He locked his arms around her legs, keeping her pinned down. The nurse screamed back, "You're both dead tonight. You and that useless girl." Ivy stepped back, one step then another. She saw Ephraim's shaking hand, saw the blood flooding beneath him. A sob tore out of her. "Mr. Stone, I can't leave you," Ephraim bellowed. "Ivy, don't waste our sacrifice." The elevator doors slid open. A blinding white hallway, red emergency lights pulsing. Ivy looked back, one last time. Ephraim clung to the assassin, their silhouettes grappling like shadows trying to strangle one another. He looked at Ivy, and for the first time, he smiled. A pained, gentle, unshakably brave smile. "Protect him. Protect Elias." Tears streamed down Ivy's face. Then she turned and ran. She bolted through the hallway as gunshots thundered behind her. People scrambled. Hospital security shouted commands. Screams echoed against white walls. Ivy fought through the crowd, heart pounding until it hurt. Outside, snow fell thick and merciless. Wind slashed her skin like knives. She slipped down the icy stairs, breath coming out in clouds of white. Behind her, sirens wailed. Flashlights swept across the parking lot. She had no idea where she was going. No idea where to hide. Only one truth burned in her chest. The man she loved was lying somewhere between life and death. Ivy ran into the winter night, her breath breaking, her legs shaking. She whispered into the frozen wind, "Elias, please don't die. Please." After Ivy escaped, hospital guards rushed into the elevator. The young nurse and Ephraim were gone. Only blood stains and a fallen gun remained. But the real horror was waiting in the ICU. The door smashed open. Glass shattered across the floor. Snow wind howled through the room. A nurse screamed, "The bed is empty. The patient is gone." The heart monitor was ripped out. Only a trail of blood remained, dragging from the bed to the shattered window and vanishing into the winter storm beyond. No one knew where Elias was, who had taken him, whether he was alive or dead. Only one thing remained, a sheet of paper slapping against the wall in the wind, a blank white sheet, with one sentence written in black ink: "If you want him alive, go to the place where it all began." At the bottom, a broken snowflake symbol. Jonathan's signature warning. Ivy stood alone in the Christmas snowfall, gasping for breath, blood seeping from her heel. She didn't know that. High above, on the hospital rooftop, Elias was being dragged away, unconscious, bleeding, covered in falling snow. A distant male voice murmured, "Take him to the northern facility. Jonathan wants this game finished on Christmas night." Snow kept falling, white enough to hide the fresh blood on the ground. Ivy didn't know how long she had been running. Each step cracked her heart a little more. Elias, the only man who had ever protected her from the world, now vanished in the very night they were meant to hold each other. She stopped beneath a dim street lamp, breath shaking in the cold. Only the sound of snowfall and her trembling heartbeat remained. A single question echoed in her mind. If two people love each other this deeply, why is fate this cruel? But then she remembered Elias's eyes, the desperate pleading for her to live. And Ivy understood. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of the path she had to take to win back the man she loved. She gripped the paper with the broken snowflake. Her eyes no longer trembled. There was only determination, pain, and a love sharp enough to carve through the dark. She whispered, "Elias, wait for me," and stepped into the shadows. Thank you for staying until the final second of this chapter. If your heart still aches, if you want to dive deeper into dark, twisted, burning love stories filled with secrets and emotion, don't forget to subscribe to The Ambiguous Heart. Every subscription is a heartbeat that keeps stories like this alive, a spark that allows me to craft tales even deeper, even darker, and even more beautiful. See you in the next story, where hearts never lie and love always comes with a price.